Think about this for a second. I think I finally found the clearest way to explain this. And this might be one of the biggest noodle cookers I've come up with yet. Everything around you requires something prior to it. You required prior physical conditions. Earth required prior conditions. Stars required prior conditions. Even our universe might depend on something deeper. So imagine tracing those requirements backwards. Something requires something, which requires something, which requires something. Eventually we have to ask, does that chain ever reach zero? And by zero, I mean zero prior requirements. Nothing deeper required to make that fundamental reality exist. Because think about it. If you reach what you think is the fundamental, but it requires something deeper to exist, then guess what? You haven't reached the fundamental. That deeper thing just became your new candidate. So here's my new principle. Eventually, prior requirements reach zero, or reality has some infinite or non-terminating structure, and that possibly deserves its own argument. But suppose reality does reach zero. Now we have one absolutely insane question. What exists at zero? Because there are two radically different ideas we can compare. First, absolute non-existence. Absolutely nothing exists. No space, no time, no matter, no energy, no laws, no information, no probability, no potential, no God, nothing. And here's what's fascinating. Absolute nothing requires nothing. Why? Because nothing exists. There isn't anything there to require anything. Zero existence, zero prior requirements. But now look at the other side. Fundamental existence, something exists. But it exists at the absolute foundational level. What does that require prior to it? Again, zero. Because if something deeper were required to make it exist, that deeper thing would be more fundamental. Do you see the symmetry now? Absolute nothing requires nothing, because nothing exists. But fundamental existence requires nothing prior, because nothing exists beneath it. Those sound almost identical, but their consequences are completely different. One gives you nothing, the other gives you something. And here's the one observation neither of us can really argue with. Look around. Something exists. We're here. Existence is present. And this is where I need to make an extremely important distinction. When I say fundamental existence requires nothing prior, I'm not saying it came from nothing. Those are completely different claims. I'm saying the exact opposite. It didn't come from absolute nothing. It is being proposed as non-derived. There was no deeper existent thing required to make it exist. It simply occupies the foundational level. And now, we can finally revisit the question, who created God? If God is genuinely the fundamental, then God requires zero prior existent causes. Because if something X were required to make God exist, then investigate X. X would now occupy the deeper explanatory position. And God wouldn't have been the fundamental you were looking for. So my argument is not everything needs a creator except God. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying ordinary, dependent things require prior conditions. But once you actually reach the absolute endpoint, the prior requirement reaches zero. And here's another important point. This principle alone doesn't automatically prove that the fundamental is God. Because someone could agree with everything I've said and tell me, fine, Brian, I agree, something fundamental requires nothing prior, but I think that fundamental is an internal, impersonal reality. And you know what? That's a legitimate response. Because now we finally reached the real battle. The question is no longer who created it. The question becomes, what is it? Is the zero requirement fundamental intelligent? Is it impersonal? Is reality somehow infinite or self-contained? Or is it something none of us have even conceived yet? That is where I believe the God debate gets really interesting. Because now we have two stages. Stage one, why is there something rather than nothing? And stage two, if something is fundamental, what properties does it have? And when I look at consciousness, the mathematical intelligibility of reality, the physical order of the universe, and everything else I've been talking about in these videos, I believe the cumulative arrow points toward intelligence. And that's why my answer remains God. Not because zero requirements magically proves God, but because I believe God is the best candidate for what exists. When prior requirements finally reach zero, so remember this. Eventually, prior requirements reach zero. The question is, what remains when they do? Absolute nothing? Fundamental existence? And if it's fundamental existence, what is it? My answer is God. Now it's your turn. What do you think exists at zero? Bake my noodle down below. Leave a comment and follow for the next video.